Alrighty, guys, good morning. And I am excited today to do a live stream on a Wednesday. So the whole schedule is different this year. And Harold here decided to be our first Wednesday live. So Harold Thornbro is on with us today to talk about you can homestead anywhere. But before we jump into that topic, which I think is going to be a really fun discussion, Harold, tell us about who you are and how you ended up on this show of all places.
Well, we made contact a long time ago, actually. Didn't we? You was on my podcast actually a couple of years ago, I think, about a year and a half ago, probably. Yeah. And I stopped doing it for a while, and then we started back up a few months ago. But yeah, you was on that show, and but I think when you very first started podcasting, I reached out to you right off the bat and kind of touch base with you. Always exciting to have another fellow podcaster in the space, so it was fun. But yeah, I mean, I got into homesteading though. I grew up homesteading, so that's one thing, but kind of got away from it, for the early years there of adulthood. And then in 2012 got slammed back into it. Yeah.
How did you get slammed back into it exactly?
Well, always had the dream to do it one day. I was running my own trucking business for years and, just got sidetracked with all that. We have a house in town. And at the time, we were just 1/10 of an acre. We have since bought the lot next to us, so we're a 1/4 acre now with a barn.
Woo! That's
doubled up.
Big living right there.
Yeah, it is. It felt like it for sure when you go from 1/10 of an acre. But for the first couple of years, even homesteading on 1/10 of an acre. But in 2012, I was 39 years old, almost 40, and I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. And it was a punch in the face because I felt pretty healthy. I mean, I wasn't, grossly overweight. I was a truck driver, so most of them are a little bit overweight. It seems like you just eat bad, and that's what it was. It was a lifestyle thing. It was eating out a couple times a day. I'm living on the road a lot, and not getting any exercise. You're just sitting in that seat all the time, eating fast food, and not good for you, and sure enough, it caught up with me pretty early in life, 39 years old. So in getting diagnosed with that and had to deal with it. And the early diagnosis was, let's remove a 30-year colon and get you on chemo.
Yeah.
So, I had the surgery, pretty hard surgery, got through that and started chemo.
Mm-hmm.
And I got 3 sessions into chemo. They put the port in and did all the things, and you're just geared up for it. And 3 sessions into it, and I said, if I'm going to go down, this is not the way I'm going down. This is bad. I mean, I think it hit me harder than it hits a lot of people. So I was aggressively looking at alternative options. Of course, you talk to a doctor, there are no alternative options. This is your only option. You're going to die if you don't do this.
If you don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
so you're like, okay, I'll die.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want that, but I have family and still kids in high school at the time, and I didn't want that, of course, but I was like, I can't do this. I don't want to. And I didn't feel very good about it being an option to save my life anyway. To be honest, if I thought, well, to me, it did the opposite. I felt like it's weakening me so much, my body can't fight, this. So, alternative options I found was I started doing a lot of reading, and the ketogenic diet was that option. It sounded like, but clean keto, of course. And let's just put this in perspective. At this time, I wasn't owning my own business. I'd sold my business. I started driving for a local company. We didn't exactly have money falling out of our rear. We were okay. We were doing fine. We
do any of us really?
Little money in the bank, but
I mean, be a homesteader and you will have money falling out of your rear. That's the way it works, right?
And I've been off work for a couple months for the surgery and all the stuff. So we're just draining our savings, paying bills and whatnot. So it's like, well, healthy eating isn't exactly cheap. When you buy the top quality stuff in the grocery store, it's pretty salty. And the option on that was like grow your own. It's even healthier. And, so, and I've always wanted to be a homesteader, but again, the dilemma I'm facing is I don't have any land. I live here in town. I've always wanted to have some land, but what do I do? So I start watching a lot of YouTube videos. I'm like, okay, how much food can I actually grow on this little of a space? Is it enough to even matter? Because in my mind, it's like, I don't even know if you can. I mean, if I throw a little raised bed or two out there, is it going to make a difference? Is
Mhm.
it going to give me enough food or whatever? And I think at the time, you know, when you're sitting around doing chemo, you know, nothing else to do, you're watching a lot of YouTube. So I come across a video um, from the Gervais family. You ever heard of them? Out in
No, but
California.
apparently I need to go check them out.
Well, the dad in the family, he since passed, Jules Gervais, but the kids still carry on. It's called the Urban Homestead, and they're
Okay.
in California, and they have a tenth of an acre growing space, a little
Yeah,
more
I
than.
guess I have heard of them.
Yeah, I
I
think the
haven't
first
watched
big year
anything they've done.
they had like a 6,000 pound, you know,
Yeah.
grew 6,000 pounds of food first big year, and it just got bigger after that. But I come across this video they put out called Homegrown Revolution, and
Mhm.
basically just tell their story, you know. And I was so inspired by that, and I was like, well, he's got just a little more growing space than I got, and look at that food, look at the amount of food. So it gave
You're
me
like, "If
some
I get
hope.
3,000 pounds, I'm good."
Yeah, it gave me a lot of hope and a lot of inspiration to just get out there. And I built a garden. You know, at the time it was raised beds. Again, not a lot of money at this time, so I'm breaking down pallets and tearing down fence pickets and whatever I can to make raised beds. And I'm getting soil from a friend of mine who has an excavating business, and we're dumping topsoil in there because I didn't know anything else. And I just started planting stuff, and you know, I first year grew quite a bit of food, you know, and then got into rabbits shortly after that and started raising a lot of rabbits, and then
Yeah.
got into quail and started raising quail, and it just grew and grew and grew. And then since then it's grew a lot. You know, we're growing a lot of food now. Food forest. So we got a little mini food forest going on here. Lots of garden stuff, lots of quail, lots of rabbits, you know, herb garden, a lot of stuff going on a pretty small space. And
Great. Well, before we jump into some more detail, guys on the live stream, today we're talking about homesteading where you are, no matter where that is. Okay. And part of the reason to homestead is to reduce expenses. If you are interested in high quality food, you can produce your own high quality food from where you are. Now, it's a lot easier in somewhere that has a tenth of an acre than if you are just an apartment, obviously. But we're going to talk about that
yeah,
today. And in an environment where we're seeing a lot of layoffs, I think this is an important topic for anybody to watch. So if you're watching this right now and you can think of some people who should be here, share this out right now so they can see this and get inspired to start now, because right now is when you start getting ready to plant. And I think
yep,
this is a super important topic and the perfect time to have this discussion. Okay.
yeah.
So now we have an idea of what got you interested in homesteading, but before we jump into that, how hard was it to go against the prevailing medical wisdom of chemotherapy and all of that, and transition to a ketogenic diet to try to control your cancer that way? And
Mm-hmm.
like, how did that go? Because how many years ago was that now?
That was 2012. I did my first chemo
2012.
treatment on my
So
40th
I noticed
birthday.
that
Yeah.
10 years later, you're still alive.
Yeah, I'm still here. And at 5 years, the doctor told me to quit coming back. He said, "You're cured. Go, get away from me."
Yeah. So
But at
well,
first, that's not what he said. He said, when I
he
first
said,
told him,
"You're
I was
gonna
like,
die."
yeah, I went in there and I was pretty stern. I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. And I said, I just stop. We're done. I'm going to go this route. And he's like, well, this is your only hope. And I'm going to see, you know, you're going to come back in a year or two and there's not going to be anything we can do for you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm done. And so let's get this surgery scheduled, get this poured out of my chest. Let's get all this done. He's like, no, leave that in because you may change your mind. I said, I ain't changing my mind. Get it out. And then 2 weeks later, I had that out. And, you know, it was easier for me. It was easier for me to make that decision. It
Yeah.
was hard on my family because I think, and I know they thought I was just giving up. And, I wasn't. I felt really strongly about this was going to be the best
Yeah.
route for me. And I thought, you know, the system got me in this mess. The system ain't going to be able to get me out of it. And it's kind of my thought anyway. You know,
Yeah.
I say that carefully though, because I know there are a lot of people who have went through the full chemo and they cured, you
Yeah.
know, they got past it and they went on. I don't say do as I do on that. This was a personal choice for me and it came with some risk. It probably did come with a lot of risk, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was definitely, it was easy for me to tell the doctors that. It was hard for my family to accept that
Yeah,
and tell them.
that kind of mimics a story. A friend of mine who I used to work with on corporate facilitations, his sister got breast cancer and she decided not to do chemo or any of that other stuff. And she turned to diet and essential oils. And and he was like, she had 5 kids, like all of the stuff. So he was really, he said he asserted a lot of pressure on her to be there for her family and to try harder and not to go the way she went. And for her, it also worked. But there are also people for whom that does not work at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that, I think that's the important, that's an important lesson to look at. If you are facing a cancer diagnosis, you have to make the best choice you can make.
For you.
And there are a lot of options. But you're going to, like your family may not understand.
Right. And
whichever way you go.
Yeah. And honestly, some people don't have near as hard of a time with chemo. I think I had too much clean living in my life because it hit me pretty hard.
I don't know. Most people I know have gone through chemo. It hit them pretty hard. But
well, there was a few people. I mean, I was sitting in chairs beside people getting it, and they were telling me stories. Oh, it doesn't really bother me at all. And they've been doing it for 6-8 months. And I'm like, man, and it would just knock me down like hard. And I went back to work at this point too. So I'm trying to drive a truck, do chemo. I mean, it was bad, and I was having a real hard time with it. This worked out well. I felt, as soon as I came off the chemo, of course, I felt better. I started the keto, felt really good. Better than I ever felt my whole life. And I just got a boost of energy, and I got a lot of, nothing will really give you energy like inspiration and motivation, and nothing's more motivating than dying. Like if you don't do something, you're going to die. It will motivate you. And I only tell this story, I think one of the biggest reasons I tell this story on an episode like this is because I think people could be facing not this situation, but a situation that's going to be a desperate situation. I think that we're looking at tough economic times, possibly next year, 2, whatever. I don't know. We don't know that for sure, but things aren't shaping up well. I mean, look at the price of eggs and lettuce and the shortages and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's going to be a lot of people who feel like a little bit hopeless. Like, okay, I don't have an option to go out there and buy 20 acres and get started homesteading. So what can I do? I'm just going to nothing. There's nothing I can do.
Right.
And I say, no, it's not true. There's stuff you can do. And, even in an apartment, I mean, there's indoor gardens, there's microgreen sprouting. I mean, you could have a salad a day that you're growing in an apartment.
Yeah, you can grow mushrooms in an apartment.
Absolutely. There's a lot you could do in an apartment. You can't do as much as if you had a little, standard city lot. And the fact is, in the United States, most people live in a house with a small backyard. I mean, just most people have that situation.
Yeah.
And so I think it just speaks to the masses to say, you can do something where you're at, and putting in some raised beds and planting a couple fruit trees, and even bringing stuff inside and starting with the microgreens and, like you said, the mushrooms or whatever. You can just start. And anybody I know that's ever started didn't stop at that point. They always just continue to expand because of the benefits of it, for sure. But for me, it was a huge benefit. I mean, I think it done a lot of things. I think just the health of the eating, of course, did a lot for me. Eating better foods, homegrown foods. Mm-hmm. Also the exercise, just getting out, working in a garden, doing things every day. Cause I was working in it every day, doing things. And then also just mentally, I think mentally you get something that just can kind of set you down a path, and it keeps you focused and gives you some hope. And I think that's important when there's things that are bad in your life, to have some hope. And homesteading gave me a lot of hope, for a future again, because I felt pretty down for a while there,
Mm-hmm.
As you can imagine. And that gave me some hope and a path to go down that, it just put my feet to work and got me going. And we haven't stopped yet, 10 years later, so.
Yep. No, that's not a bad story. Okay. So let's start with mindset in homesteading. In order to be a homesteader, what 2 or 3 things do you need to change about your perspective of your immediate home around you, do you think? Is it seeing value where there's no value? Like, what do you think you need to, because a lot of people look at where they live and the yard is already in, if they have a yard. If they don't have a yard, they're like, I don't have a yard. So how do you go from that Icantium position, as Jack Spirko would say, to, okay, I see potential of the first thing I can do? What has to change here mentally?
Well, for one thing, I think inspiration is important. I put a lot on that because I think if you can see other people doing it and you can realize the possibilities it will do a lot for your mental stability. So I think it's important to jump on YouTube or read some books of people who are doing it. You know, it was a thing that gave me a mind change, because I went from I can't do this here to, well, it is possible, you know. And then you just have to really step out and start evaluating. Okay, let's look at where the sun is casting during the day, and let's see where the possible locations are here to do things, and not focus on the I can't, but what I can, you know. And I think that's a big thing, because a lot of people are always, especially when it comes to urban homesteading, it's all about I can't do what I can't do. I can't have chickens, or I can't, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
1,000 reasons of why they can't do it. But the change you have to make is the focusing on what I can do. And I haven't seen a situation yet where there wasn't something you could do.
Yeah.
I mean, something, even if it meant just bringing it into the house and doing it.
Right.
So that is a big mind change, you know.
Well, and rabbits are pets. They're not livestock.
Right.
In a lot of, like, most places don't have rabbit rules, although some do have the number of rabbits, right? But if your rabbit gets pregnant and has babies, and you're like, I'm sorry, man, like I didn't know that was a boy.
Yeah.
We're waiting till they're weaned. That's going to be about 8 weeks, and then we're gonna send them out, because we wouldn't want to kill these, would they? And then, like, in your garage, you're like,
yeah, I know what you're talking about with experience. My thought on livestock in town has always been, no matter what the ordinance is, if they can't hear it, smell it, or see it, does it exist really? I don't know.
Is it really here?
Yeah, does it really exist? It's why I have rabbits and quail. And chickens. I mean, chickens are an option in a lot of you know, towns allow chickens, but those that don't, there's quail. And yeah, it's a smaller bird and it's a smaller egg, but you can grow a lot of them. A lot of them in a small space.
You know, I've got a friend in Dallas who has finches, and they make a mess with their food, like it falls down to the bottom of the cage.
Yep.
And so he has at the bottom of their cage grass growing up through a mesh thing, so it can't get trimmed down to below it, and quail down there. And then they clean up all of that. Plus I think he has black soldier flies in there. Work, like, it's all a system,
a little closed loop system.
And then guess who eats the black soldier fly? So larva. And so it's a whole, he was like, this is how I can make the cage clean itself. This is, you know, how I can make it grow the food. Yeah. And he approaches everything, and it's all small scale stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked it. You know, when I first started homesteading, the first couple of years, it was just raise beds, grow food on the table. It was all about health, you know. And then I got introduced to permaculture, you know, and then that radically changed my perspective.
I did everything wrong.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, I did. I mean, I literally ripped out this garden, put it over there, put trees here. I mean, I really started focusing on the layout, the sectors, the zones, really thinking about the layout of the property. And it did a few things. It increased the amount of food that I was able to grow, but it also really reduced the labor that I was putting into that, growing that food too, because we switched over to a lot of perennial stuff, put in a lot more trees and bushes, you know, a lot of perennial plants, and still love the vegetable garden and the annuals, but it just that whole perspective on, you know, the permaculture viewpoint, it really changed my homestead a lot. So yeah, I think that's an important thing to look at, really evaluate your property. You know, if I'd had time, I might've just at that point just stopped and took, of course I've been living here for years, but I might've just wanted to look at my property for a year to really consider things. But a lot of times people wait so much, they don't do anything. You know, I would rather see somebody just make a whole bunch of mistakes and just get after it than, you know, evaluate forever and it never happens. You know what I mean?
And the kinds of mistakes you want to make is you put up a temporary fence and it doesn't work there and it's easy to take down, or like, you don't want to make a permanent structure built sort of thing mistake. Obviously,
putting in gardens it can be a pretty temporary thing. I mean, it just build here now. Okay, you just plant grass again and move and plant over here. It's
right. It's not awesome, but it's not
permanent.
terrible. It's not the end of the world. Like I've moved my garden 3 or 4 times at the Holler Homestead, and it's back where it started.
Yeah. Well, maybe that wasn't a bad place. I made the right choice.
Well, it's a stupid place because it's not in my zone 1. And it's my kitchen garden, but it's like literally where things grow the best.
Yeah.
And so now I'm trying to make it so I want to be up there.
And that's the good
Trying
thing.
to redefine zone 1 at the Holler Homestead.
And if there is one good thing about urban homesteading, small scale homesteading, is that
All zone 1.
nothing is, well, maybe it's not all zone 1, but it's nothing so far away where it's out of the way. You like a 5-second walk and you're into your zone 2. So it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does make it easier. And everything's right there. Everything's close. And really my viewpoint turned into another mindset change I had was I have unlimited space, or at least as far up as I can reach, because I can grow things up,
Yeah.
and I got all kinds of property up here.
Yeah. I feel like on bigger homesteads, we get lazy and we grow out when we don't need to. And it's easier to manage when you grow up.
It can be.
Like we do a lot of trellising here, but I still I haven't maximized maintenance of the weed problem in between beds yet here after 15 years. So, and that's because I'm not out there every day.
And I'll tell you, you mentioned weeds and having that intense growing where everything's just packed in really super tight and everything. You actually get a lot less weeds because there ain't no room for weeds.
There's no room for them. Yeah. You got to get out of the way so my chard can grow, right?
Absolutely. So you do a lot of trellising. So you're just thinking differently when you plant in small spaces. You think up, you're growing up, you think the sunlight and tree, where you're going to put trees. If you do have room for trees on your property, you just want to make sure you're putting them in the right places. You want to
dwarf trees,
or just keep them pruned really aggressively and keep them low. I mean, these are the things you can do for sure. And another thing about any homestead, but it is really helpful when you're talking about urban homesteading, is you really come into the mindset that not everything that you're doing has to come from your property. And what I mean by that is you can really take advantage of foraging and hunting and bartering. Like I know a guy who we've done this several times now. He wants rabbit meat. He loves rabbit meat, but he don't want to raise rabbits, but he raises pigs. So
and you're like,
a few times we have traded rabbit meat for pork, for bacon and pork chops or whatever. And I'll make that trade all day long, so I like some pig. And, so you can do things like that, but we do a lot of hunting, I do a lot of small game hunting and bird hunting and deer hunting. So, I mean, it becomes a big part. We do a lot of mushroom foraging and just other kinds of foraging and stuff. And we have actually a state property of a few hundred acres. That's just, 5 minutes from my house that I can go drive to. And you're allowed to do all that there. So that's pretty great to have that resource there. And I can bring in a lot of food for my homestead from that. So you take advantage of other things like that as well, which can really increase how much food you're bringing in.
Yeah. And that goes back to mindset, right? It's like, how can I grow the food? Like asking yourself, what can I do?
Yep.
Rather than obsessing about what I can't do,
Absolutely.
Which is also important on a big homestead where if you come in insisting you have to have chickens and chickens are a terrible fit, or pigs or whatever, because you were so excited by Jill Salatin's method of rotating pigs.
Yeah.
And it's just not appropriate for your homestead, which is how my homestead is. Even though I see how I can rotate them, I need more acreage for the kind of pigs I want to rotate. And I say, okay, but what can I grow here? You end up maybe with a different solution, but it's a good solution. Like I really like lamb and we now have sheep, and it's taken me 15 years to figure that the F out. Right. Because I came in with an attitude about sheep that I didn't think I wanted to manage them. And then when I finally tried them, I'm like, I'm such an idiot. It's been 15 years. Like I could have been raising these the whole time. Here's an interesting comment from Weird Acres Homestead. If you live in an apartment, you can have pets and can have pets. You can raise rabbits and quail.
Yeah, you could.
The thing about pets in apartments is this. They don't usually consider fish pets in an aquarium, or gerbils, and rabbits can sometimes get, because it's in a cage, can get under that line. But birds are also not often considered pets. And that's something you can find out for your particular one. I want to have a couple birds in here and they just stay in the cage. Is that considered a pet or not? And if they say, yeah, then you got all right, to the races with the quail. And the only, that way, if they come in and inspect your apartment, you don't have to worry about how to hide the quail.
And I would say this, that I would never discourage somebody from doing that in an apartment. For the education on raising quail and rabbits, because you're going to learn a lot by having one or two of each, whatever.
Yeah.
But to be able to raise them in a significant number that would actually put food on your table on a regular basis, it would be difficult in that kind of a setting. If you had access to a garage or something, where you could, put them in there, that'd work great. But in an apartment, yeah, that's gonna generate some mess and some smell and whatnot.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to have just a one or two of each for the experience and for the practice, and so when you do maybe go to a new homestead or a bigger homestead or a little property or whatever, I think that could be great education for you to take that on. But I would probably discourage people from doing it in a larger scale than that in an apartment, because it can generate quite the mess and smell if you have a bunch of them.
Yeah, and if you don't have a way to manage that, right? So if you're gonna do, like if you had 4 quail that were female, and you had somebody you could work with to replenish them without doing that, like you could manage that without it being smelly, and you would get 4 quail eggs a day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's eggs at that point. Yep. And do quail eat scraps? Because I haven't raised quail.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they'll eat some. Yeah.
So there's some of that, like, because the other thing I think about a homesteading mindset is, what can I do with my waste stream to not have to throw it away?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And especially on the food scrap stuff, like, is a worm bin what I need to do to feed my garden?
Yeah.
Like, and can I do that in a way it doesn't smell? Because you
can
bringing that mindset to a big homestead, guys, is also good, because smells happen.
You definitely have to stay on top of things to keep it, especially in an urban setting, just to keep things under control. Like I said, I can't see it, hear or smell it, and that can get out of hand pretty quick if you're not pretty tidy about it. You want to keep things in a controllable way, because it only takes one complaint from a neighbor and you won't be doing that anymore, more than likely. They will make sure
where you are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. In an urban environment, if it's not allowed and you do it, if they smell it, if they know about it, they can shut you down pretty quick. But yeah, so I try to keep that under control. That being said, like I said, I am all for doing anything you can get away with doing.
Yeah.
And, to the max if you can. I mean, that's what I'm about. But it's a lot easier to grow microgreens in your apartment.
Mm-hmm.
A lot easier.
Microgreens are not usually smelly unless you really mess that up.
Yeah, yeah. But if you have a small
backyard, make anything smelly, by the way. It's
anything.
Personal, absolutely. Like, I have a talent for doing things wrong and then being like, oh yeah, don't do it this way.
Yeah, yeah. You can do some large scale fermenting and get that smelling if you don't do that right. So, I mean, whatever. But if you do have a small backyard and a garage and things like that, I mean, it's amazing what you can do. And like I said,
yeah. So let's start with some examples. Assuming that you have a small backyard and a little bit of space, let's talk through 2 or 3 things that work well in a low footprint environment.
Well, as far as gardening goes, I mean, obviously, just popping them some raised beds wherever the sun is giving you probably at least 6 hours of sunlight is a great place to start. Now, that being said, lumber is expensive.
Mm-hmm. It's less expensive right now, though.
Is it going down? I haven't even.
Well, it's like, so at our peak, we were over $11 for a 2x4 by 8 here. It's down below $375.
Well, you would know with that bathroom remodel going on.
I would. I'm like, wow, this is cheaper than it would have been a year ago.
Yeah,
I know, because I paid for all the lumber in Taj Mahal.
Yeah, when I bought this second property over here next to us, and I wanted to turn the entire front yard into a garden in this property, and I held off for 2 years, because when I bought the property, the first summer was the summer of 2020, and everything went crazy, lumber prices and everything. I thought, well, but I want to put that in. I want to put raised beds in. So I didn't that year. So I waited another year, didn't put raised beds in. So this year I said, I'm tired of waiting and I don't want to spend that money. So I just got a rototiller out here and just turned it into a garden, and it didn't cost me anything. So, and plopped it in the ground. So that's an option. You don't have to spend a lot of money, but like I said, my first couple raised beds were built out of fence pickets and pallets.
Yeah.
So
I stacked rocks for mine.
Yeah. Whatever you can do.
Every crack between every rock grows a weed, just FYI.
Every time somebody starts talking about, you see these, these old memes and everything about, I grew tomato. I wanted to save money, grew tomatoes. My tomatoes cost me $20 or whatever, for whatever. They talk about the price of things. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
You've
seen my tomato system, right?
I don't know if I have.
Okay, so I put pictures of it. So I have a hydroponic tomato system all along my south wall.
Okay.
And I do put like we've been experimenting with worm casting juice instead of minerals that are mined, but I'm not letting the perfect get in the way of the good. I have used mined minerals in that.
Yeah.
And it grows tomatoes like nuts and helps me not get the blight.
Yeah.
Okay. But more importantly, it screens the south side of my house in Tennessee where it's hot from the sun. So it helps me with my cooling bill to have a vining plant up that side of the house. And
Sure.
I grow tomatoes in soil now too, because I've learned the aspirin trick, which mostly works.
I heard about that. I think
Yeah,
from
it
you and
mostly
Jack,
works.
and I haven't ever
Jack
tried that.
has less blight pressure than I do,
Yeah.
but it mostly works. And my tomatoes did way better last year than they've ever done with the aspirin. But with that in mind, I could have, like, if you look at, like, I had to buy all of the infrastructure, I had to buy the mine minerals. I'm paying power to circulate water, right? And that's all adding up to what? Well, I did the math on it, and by the time I get a couple 100 pounds of tomatoes off there, it's less than you buy tomatoes at the farmer's market.
Oh yeah. I would
And
imagine.
and I depreciate the infrastructure cost over 2 or 3 years, but even that wasn't that expensive. I put a few $100s into the infrastructure here in the form of PVC and buckets.
Yeah.
And that was it. And pumps and hoses.
See, I went the opposite route. We're doing aquaponics here. We didn't do hydroponics. We're doing aquaponics, and I've had great success with that, with growing things as well. And yeah, I mean, it is a little bit of an expense putting it in, but once you get it in, I mean, the production out of a system like that is amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, for me, it also shades the house. I can take cuttings off of those, root them, and put them in my garden when I have space in the garden.
Yeah.
So there's a lot you can do. And that's something that if you have a balcony in an apartment, so then, like, we start with, you have a little ground, you do raised beds. Well, what's the balcony version of that? It has to look pretty or they'll get pissed off about it.
Yeah. I consider
Right.
that in some places.
And so would having vines up cause problems? I don't know. You don't know till you try. So how can you do that without spending $700 to have pretty vines? And then if your pretty vines happen to give you food, great. If tomatoes and things of that nature are going to get you in trouble with your apartment manager, have a beautiful, well-trimmed blueberry bush. It puts on nice flowers. And once a year, guess what you get off that bush?
Yeah.
Yeah. Blueberries are great landscaping bushes.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, things like peppers, I mean, it's a pretty plant, just it doesn't get super tall, and it fits in a pot just great. You can grow them in a pot.
You can take them inside.
Yep. Take them inside and keep them alive all winter if you want, if you got the window that you can put them in front of. I mean, there's just so many things you can do. And that's the key, just focusing on all the things you can do. But yeah, getting some raised beds out there, or finding other options like hydroponics or aquaponics or things like that, where you can make it work. These are great options. And every homestead's going to be different. I mean, I've seen backyards that didn't have a lick of shade. I mean, the lick of sun, it's just so shaded out that it was hard to grow anything there. So you go to the front yard and you put some.
Yeah. And you're like, there. Now it has to look like landscaping.
Yeah. But you can do that. I mean, absolutely. I mean, all along I have like a rock wall, landscape blocks across all the way the entire front of my house, sidewalk right there. And anytime I'm considering landscaping there, I always just look to edibles first. Like the entire wall, I have nasturtiums draping over.
Oh, perfect.
All the way down that wall. And then I have like a couple guilds out in that very front, right up next to the sidewalk, where I have all kinds of fruit trees and bushes and everything. But I just keep them clean and nice and mulched. Looks just like nice landscaping, but growing food there. And it works great. And these are things you have to consider for sure. And I enjoy it though. I mean, I love to have a nice looking property. Don't get me wrong. I like it too. And I like that my neighbors would think it would look nice too. But beyond that, it puts food on the table. And that's the more important thing.
I think one of my favorite food producing bushes that I ever encountered was not on my property in Portland, Oregon, which is where I started before I came here. My neighbor across the street had a rosemary bush that was taller than me by another half of me.
Yeah.
And, bigger around than I can put my arms. And it was just up outside going up the side of her house. And I was like, so mind if I take some cuttings off that from time to time for cooking? And I'd be in the middle of cooking and like run out my door across the street and go, and then come back. She didn't care.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's back when I thought you could just grow rosemary anywhere with no effort, because in Oregon you can. But I mean, I used fresh rosemary and everything. I never had, because you buy a sprig at the store for like $7, and it's
Yeah.
two
It's
little
crazy.
sad looking little half dried sprigs.
All the herbs a lot of them are really nice for landscaping, and all of them are expensive too if you go to buy them. So yeah, any herbs you're growing.
Well, let's think about it. If somebody's just listening to this and they're like, oh, maybe I should instill or start some things in my smaller space that will help me reduce my food costs in 2023 this year. What 2 things do you think they should work on?
Well, you mean what plants should they plant, or what?
Whatever. Is it livestock? Is it plants? What
Well,
should they do?
definitely, I would start with plants. It's the easiest thing, but you also got to consider what you like. I mean,
Mhm.
if you like lettuce, there's nothing easier than growing lettuce. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's just you throw seeds in out there, and just a few weeks later, you have a salad, right?
Mhm.
Not much easier than that. You just have to consider what you like, because everybody likes something different, of course. But there's a lot of carrots grow easy, radishes grow easy. I mean, just there's a few plants that are going to grow super fast and with
Well, what
very
are those
little effort.
plants? So lettuce. What
Lettuce,
else?
carrots. I would put carrots in that list.
Yeah.
Um,
Radishes are on that
radish,
list.
you'll
If
have
you
them
like,
in
if you don't like
2 weeks.
radishes, guys, do not grow them, because you will be
Well,
swimming in radishes.
I'll say this about radish though: if you think you don't like radish, have you ever tried them cooked?
Yeah. Oh, I love radishes.
Completely different. I mean,
Yeah.
it's completely different. I mean, I'll make
Mhm.
like hash browns out of radishes, and
Yeah.
it takes away all that heat that's in radishes, and it's just great. I love them. So even if you think you don't like them, maybe you'll like them a little different
That's a
way.
low carb, keto friendly
Yeah,
hack. Radish,
I like growing. I mean, there's certain things I like.
radish hash browns.
There you go. It is turnips. Yeah, same way. There's just things I like that. A lot of your root vegetables grow really fast and really good, and they'll provide a lot of food for you. I love beets, so I grow beets, but
Mhm.
a lot of people don't like beets. Spinach grows easy in cooler
Mhm.
weather. It won't grow in the summer heat.
Mhm.
So it just depends on the time of the year for that. Early spring, late fall, you might get some. Um, Cabbage. I used to have really bad luck with cabbage
I
because
have bad luck with cabbage.
not because it's hard to grow, but because of the pest pressure.
Yeah, that.
And then I said, okay, this last year I had the best cabbage crop I ever had. I got a freezer
Mhm.
full of it because I said, okay, let's put some fabric over this. And it worked. I had zero pest pressure.
Nice.
As soon as I planted it, I put row cover over it, hoops and row cover over it, left it there, and no pest pressure at all. So yeah, I had the best cabbage crop ever. So I love cabbage. I mean, you can just make all kinds of things with that. Yeah, I mean, tomatoes and peppers are going to give you a lot of satisfaction. I mean,
Yeah. They're
they take a
harder to
lot longer
grow,
to
but they
grow.
will. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you want one that's easy, cherry tomatoes. I
Yeah,
mean, you're going to get
those
tons of
things
those.
are great. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to get tons, and they'll go good in your salads you're making. My first 2 garden beds I put in, I named them my salad and my salsa garden because that's pretty much what I grew. Anything you put in a salad, anything you put in some salsa, and that's what I was growing my first year. And I was eating a salad or 2 a day sometimes. Keto diets. I'm eating all of it I could eat. Beans are pretty easy, especially your vining beans, your stuff.
The pole
Like your
beans.
pole beans are going to grow great. Yeah, you get a nice
Mhm.
trellis going, you're going to get a lot of them. A lot of
Yeah.
them. So it's just something you're gonna get a lot of food out of, especially you get something like there's some I like, but they're pretty stringy. You get the string beans, so you have to pick them when they're kind of young.
Yeah, and
Like
you have to pull the
The
strings.
Kentucky pole beans are pretty stringy,
Mhm.
but you'll get so many of them. But you can get
Mhm.
the bush beans, like the provider beans and things like that. You'll get an abundance, grow well. I mean, that's just a few ideas of your just staples. Potatoes aren't hard to grow, and you can grow them in grow bags and in pots and things like that too. So you might even
Yeah.
consider growing some potatoes. But those are just a few things.
No. My dogs are now going to bark.
Yes, they
Sorry
are.
about that.
No, it's all good.
The one right under my mic. Shh, be quiet. Good dog. And Tactical, if you're listening to this, I don't know why there's barking going on.
They hear something you don't.
Somebody walked by the front door. It was probably him. And they're like, there's a man out there. I'm going to eat his face. That's kind of what happens.
Now, on the livestock side of things, though, if you're able to have chickens, get some chickens. I mean, you're going to get a lot of production out of chickens, and you're going to get a lot of eggs. And if you want, you can produce some meat. But if you're not able to have chickens, you might think about rabbits and quail. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
great way to go. You mentioned earlier that the roosters do make some noise. If you
Yes.
get two of them in a cage together, they make a lot of noise, or right beside each other. They'll compete with each other for sure. But I think it's kind of entertaining because like nobody knows what that sound is. They think that's some kind of crazy exotic bird in the neighborhood. What is that? And nobody knows that sound. So I don't worry about it too much because you know, it just isn't, people don't know what it is. They know what a chicken sounds like. They don't know what a quail sounds like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find that that's really good. Now, I even took my quail, and this last year I built a tractor for them. So we
Hmm.
were talking earlier about, there's things you'll do like on a large scale, like paddock movements and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, I was basically tractoring quail around through my guilds, around my guilds and around through my garden and stuff like that, and letting them eat. It was great, and what I love about that is they're making a mess because quail you've never raised them. Quail are
Yeah.
really messy. They like to sling their food everywhere.
Yeah.
Well,
Not
when they
surprised.
but if they sling
Or
it on the
birds.
ground, they just eat it off the ground. It's no big deal. So you actually save a lot of money in food costs. Plus, they're eating bugs and they're eating some grass
Yeah.
and weeds or whatever. And they don't tear up the ground like a chicken would. So you don't have to move them, in a small area, but too much. I would move them daily as they will leave a little bit of mess, but great fertilizer on the garden or wherever you're running them around. So, and we do that with the rabbits, but you definitely want to some hardware cloth on the bottom of a rabbit
Yeah.
tractor because they will dig. They'll
They will
dig some
dig.
holes for sure.
Rabbits will dig. That's
But
why
you
you
could,
put that there.
yeah, but you can definitely run them around some tractors if you can do it kind of privately. Like if you have some privacy fence up or something like that, and you don't want people seeing what you're doing, you could definitely run them around some tractors in your yard and just fine and use them out there. So a lot of things, again, a lot of things you could start with. It just depends on how far you want to go with it. I say at least start with a couple of raised beds and plant some
Yeah.
lettuce.
So maybe like list what do we like to eat vegetable wise?
Two
For
things.
some people, that's like
Yeah.
corn, beans, potatoes, right? That's
Yeah.
like your typical American. But other people are like, I like a salad every day.
Yeah.
I like, broccoli, cauliflower, whatever it is. Broccoli and cauliflower, I find are difficult to grow. It's a more advanced skill here in Tennessee. And
Again, I have to cover them.
Yeah, here it just gets so hot so fast.
Yeah, right.
So they're like, we're going to become, never mind. Bolted.
You could, just a little hint for people. You could, if you have a part of your yard that is maybe shaded in the evening.
Yeah.
It's getting like 6 hours in the morning and the whole evening it's shaded. That might be a good place for crops like that because you're creating like a microclimate where it's not going to really stay hot all the time. And it will help stuff like that grow instead of that all day sun. So just a little hint there for something like that is what I do. But yeah, I mean, I think knowing what you like to eat, of course, and knowing what can grow in your area. Do a little research and say, can you even grow that? Does okra grow where I live? I love okra. Does it grow here? Because some things are going to grow better than other places. You're going to be able to grow stuff in Michigan that you can't grow in Tennessee and vice versa.
Yeah. If you have a list of your top 10, I think you can then go talk to people who grow in the area and say, what of these things grow well and what varieties?
Varieties. Yeah. I was getting ready to say that there's certain varieties and you may even have to go with, I like heirloom stuff, but there's some stuff that I don't mind planting a hybrid of it because it's going to be more resistant to disease or maybe even something else. I mean, it's just more specialized for your area.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to make those considerations. You can learn a lot of that from seed catalogs too. Get seed catalogs, and a lot of them will just tell you this grows well in this area, this doesn't grow well in that area. I mean, a lot of times they have that in their description. So, good place to start maybe with some seed catalogs. Those free seed catalogs that you can just send off for and they'll send them to your house. It's a great time to get those too. Cause I mean, this time of the year,
I mean, you don't already have a stack like this tall that got mailed to you.
Yeah.
I've got 3 right now.
I'm on top of it. I love my free seed catalogs because it's kind of like the pastime and wintertime pastime, sit around and circle your dream list of all the things you want to grow, but then you end up not ordering half of those things because you're just sticking to your staples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Pack Rat, who is in my state, I think broccoli is a better fall crop, but you got to get it started inside and sort of transplanted and keep it shady when you transplant it in Tennessee because it's still flipping hot when you put it out. Mm-hmm. And then eventually in the fall, you can get broccoli. I know people who do that. The farmers I know who are successful with it in Tennessee use 7 dust.
Okay.
And they're putting it out soon.
Yeah. And I was very against that. But I've tried, diatomaceous earth and things like that.
Yeah.
And I just had a lot of years of misery it was broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, all those things. I mean, it would just tear them up. And then I just said, let's just put some hoops in and row cover this stuff as soon as I drop it in the ground. And what do you know? I was actually getting some crops in my kitchen. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I think back to small scale homesteading. What do you eat? And if there is a way to grow it inside, like a lettuce grow system, and you're a lettuce or microgreen consumer or both, I know Jack Spirko's done a lot of work with how to grow them in shelves, and that's super helpful on his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You can replace all of your lettuce needs. Now look at how much
Absolutely.
you spend on lettuce every month or every week. If you're
right now, it's pretty expensive too.
Yeah. Well, it was, I mean, even at a few dollars a pound, it adds up. And seeds are like $2 to $4 a packet, depending on what you buy, or you can buy them in bulk.
And to me, there's no easier plant to collect seeds from either.
Yeah.
I always let a couple go to seed, and I have all the seeds I want for the whole year off of a couple plants.
Yeah.
So yeah, really easy to collect seeds from.
So think about what you can grow inside. And then I love your idea, like a couple of easy to maintain beds. And if that means a raised bed, I think it's worth the investment of the lumber to do it.
Yeah.
If you know, or cinder blocks or whatever you're going to use,
there you go. Yeah.
It's, you know, if you don't have the few $100s, don't spend the few $100s. If you have it, I see things maybe differently than a lot of people. I'm 50 years old, and I feel like my mobility is going to go totally, like I'm going to get more mobile as I get older, right? Like it's easier to bend down, all of that. No. So when I look at even the homestead here, we're going to add some raised beds that are hip high for me.
Yeah.
So I can like sit on them and pull weeds. And that for here, the plan is I add a little bit of high cinder blocks every year and build the soil up myself.
Good idea. Yeah.
But
I did that.
Yeah.
The first ones I built out of pallets, and I got like these quarter size pallets that were about 2.5 feet tall. And I was like, okay, I think I can just fill in these holes. And I broke some down and I filled in the spaces where they were spaced, and I just nailed over them. And then I just stood them up, nailed them all together, and made like these raised beds that were like 2.5 feet tall. And I filled the bottom up with, some wood and stuff, almost like a hugelkultur type thing. And then just put 12 inches of soil in there and planted them. That's what I did with some of my first beds. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when you make it easy to maintain for yourself, even out of the, out of the chute and spending a little extra money, you're more likely to be successful growing.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that, like building, having like indoor grow beds. That was something I did that first year also. I mean, of course I grew stuff outside, and there's a couple raised beds I put up right off the bat, but then winter's coming. I'm like, I don't want to stop eating salads every day. I'm trying to eat healthy. I mean, I'm trying to get rid of cancer, right? I want to make sure it doesn't come back. And I went down to my basement and I literally just made a raised bed in my basement on the concrete floor, put soil in there and put some grow lights over it. And well, actually I was using fluorescent lights at the time. I didn't even have any like the LED grow lights. I was using like the 4-foot, fluorescent bulbs, and set up a nice little grow station. I'm growing lettuce, in my basement.
That's a really good way to control E. coli in your lettuce. Absolutely.
Comment. Yeah. You don't have to worry about, you're probably not going to be out there causing that issue like some workers might.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. There's a lot of things you can consider, and I just think it's time to consider that, and don't take on this attitude that it's hopeless. I really can't grow enough to make a difference. Because I think that's the hang up. It was the hang up with me. I was like, I knew I could grow a little bit of stuff, but was it worth it? Is it worth it to have a salad or two a week? But you can do so much more than that. I mean, we eat every day, year round from the garden, and maybe not everything on our plate, but a lot, and I'd say in the summertime, it's 70% of what we're eating from this homestead, and probably in the winter, it's 40 to 50%, and it depends on how good of a year we had and how much we put up preserving, because that's another thing you'll get into is canning and dehydrating and fermenting and all the things for storing your food. So I mean, we eat good, and I would say a majority of it comes from this homestead in town, which is amazing.
I think the other reason in town you're going to make it easy on yourself is most people who live in town have this other thing in their life. It's called a job. And like I'm out here, and I do have a job. I made my own job, but I've been able to set it up so like Monday when all hell broke loose and I needed to go deal with livestock issues, I was able to adjust what was up, right? And deal with that. That's not always the case if what you have is an office job or a job on a schedule. And then that means you have to do the homesteading stuff around it. So talk a little bit about how you think people can successfully grow their own food if they have, 8-10 hours a day where they're not able to be home, or even 12 hours.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's an excuse a lot of people have. And when I started doing this, remember what job I had? I was a truck driver. It was a 14-hour a day job. I was working 14 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week sometimes. And I did it. So, I mean,
what did you have to do that? Like, realistically,
I had
were you working all the time?
Well, I mean, again, I had weekends off, and I would just, anything big I had to do, that's when we did it, on the weekends. I mean, when it was planting time and harvesting time, most of that happened on the weekends, right? But yeah, I might have to go in, and a lot of times it was the thing that actually helped me too. I would come in from a long day at work. I start early in the morning. I get off. I still have maybe an hour or two of daylight. And I grab a basket and just take a stroll through the property, and I just pick some stuff for dinner. And it was so relaxing and nice. And then go in and make me a salad to have with whatever, my wife might put some kind of meat on or whatever. And, if we were going to do any processing of animals, of course, that's going to happen on the weekend, and have those in the freezer or whatever. You just have to space out, you have to kind of control when you're doing things. Now, if you have a significant other that wants to help you with that, that's great. That can help a lot. But if you don't, you can still do it. And when there's big jobs, you can speak a lot more to that, because you're really good about building community. And community is so important. And at first I didn't have a homesteading community. I had friends that would help me build something or whatever, if I need to call them. But some of them didn't know what the heck they were doing. They just come over and help or whatever, because they were my friends. But yeah, it's important to have some people, a community around you that can really help you out in that situation, because they all have jobs too. And you can really kind of all work together to accomplish something, and get bigger stuff done. Sometimes you got, 100 quail you want to process. It doesn't take a long time, but it's some work. You spend a lot of a day doing that. Have some friends come over and do it with you, rabbits.
Go home with quail.
Yeah. And when it's planting time, say, hey, you want to help me get my garden in this weekend? I'll help you get yours in next weekend. That's helpful, and that can help you a lot when you're doing you have the job, and since then I have took a job in the last couple of years where I'm only working, 3 days a week now. Big change in my life. Now I have a lot more time for working around here, and we're doing a lot more stuff. That's why I've really went into doing a lot more of the planting trees and building guilds and putting in pathways. And we're really trying to turn this into a full-blown holistic permaculture property. I filled that time up with podcasting and blogging and a lot of other things that I'm doing, but it's nice to have a little bit more time. And most people probably do work 40 to 50 hours a week. That's pretty average. I mean, truck drivers obviously work more than that.
Yeah. And you add a commute in there, and it's even more time,
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, but you can do it. I did it. Again, the have to is a big motivator. When they're telling you you're probably going to die if you don't make some radical changes, you'll make some radical changes, and you'll do things maybe you think you couldn't do. Yeah. And there's things you can do. You just got to be really motivated to do it. What's it going to take to motivate you to do it? Hopefully not a health crisis. Probably might be an economic crisis coming up. Who knows? I mean, don't wait for that though.
Or a job crisis. If you become unemployed, suddenly, which, I self-unemployed myself suddenly once. I did have a lot more time, and I did not qualify for unemployment without fighting for it. And I decided I would rather spend time building wealth than fighting for unemployment, which technically I should have qualified for it. But in order to get unemployment, you have to apply for jobs, a certain number of jobs a week, and you have to prove it. And the number in Tennessee is 3. And then I'm like, and I don't want any of these jobs. So I was like, never mind. I'm not willing to waste that time applying for those jobs, going to interviews if they call me in, all of that stuff, and submitting the paperwork. That's me.
Yeah.
You may be in a different situation and need that money, and it's worth the hours of time that you're putting in. But you have more time to start growing your own food, which reduces your overall expenses if you do it right. Right. And I think that's important. Is like sometimes you'll find you spent more to grow the food that you want to grow. Other times you spent less. Either one can be an option as long as you know going, like what's up on the so I think it's important to track the finances as you go.
And I'm not big on this fear-based motivation, but it's effective.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather do things because of a desire to want to do them rather than fear drove me to do it. But no doubt, a lot of people go down this path out of fear. It's like, okay, I got to do something. It was really, as much as I hate to admit it, it was the thing that drove me in the beginning. It was like fear for my own life. Since then, I found 1,000 other reasons to homestead beyond that, that are more important to me than that. But it's a big motivator, and you're right. Money, job, there's just a host of crises that can happen in your life that can take you to that point. But why wait till it gets to that point?
Yeah.
Let your thoughts about the fear of the possibilities of that happening get you to start.
Start one thing, right? Not like 9 things.
Right. Yeah. Me, I kind of went in
full 9 things when you started, though.
Way more. Okay,
yeah,
I went full blast into it, but
what we say, not what we do.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, unless you're in a have to situation, go slow.
Yeah.
If you're, I felt like I was in a have to situation, which was immediate, and I had to make a lot of changes real fast.
Yeah.
And I made those changes, and that wasn't easy, by the way. Anybody that would say, well, going keto and growing your own food is an easier way than just doing chemo to get out of it was hard. It was hard. I mean, it was really hard adjustments for me to make, and eating like that. And I've told people I've known 2 people that had the exact same cancer diagnosis as me since then. And they said, what'd you do? They just came to me and said, what'd you do? And I told them. They're like, oh, I can't do that. I can't not have soda every day, or I can't not. I mean, they literally said, I can't do that. And within 2 years, both of them were dead doing chemo. I'm not saying that that's the way it is for everybody, but that's the way it was for them. And it made me really thankful for the choices I made.
Yeah. It's interesting how if you grow up only drinking fruit juice and flavored waters, which I put soda pop in the flavored water, like category, and everything's always sweet, and you can't even do water unless there's a flavor in it. That is conditioning and programming that happened to you. And to undo it, you have to commit to undoing it, right?
Your palate will change, even eating just from your garden.
Yeah.
Things that maybe don't taste good to you at first will begin to taste really good to you. Really crave them after a while. There is a palate change that happens for sure with eating homegrown food, home cooking. And I didn't really talk about this, but I think the most important skill in all this homesteading skill is learning to cook from scratch. Because you can grow all you want, but if you don't know how to cook it in a way that makes you want to eat it, you're going to give up on it pretty quick. And that's a skill you can develop no matter where you live. I mean,
absolutely. I have a YouTube channel I'm launching all about that. Right now.
And you know what? Even if it means just going to the farmer's market and buying that food and learning how to cook it properly. Then that's what you do, because that will be better for you than staying in the food system, the garbage. And you'll have to develop a taste for things, because they'll just taste different. If you're not sweetening it up to the point where it's bad for you, and I don't know, but you'll learn a lot about using herbs and spices and things that will flavor that dish in a way that's really good, but it'll be different. It'll be different.
It's different. Most people love my cooking, and it's cooking, guys. It's not chefing. And I'm usually cooking from scratch, and I definitely cook duds just like everybody else. But what I know after being mostly home, because I was pretty home cooking until 2020, and then it was just like, I don't even want to bother with the restaurants with all this mess going on out there, right?
Right.
And I didn't eat at restaurants for a long time, and I went back to a restaurant. And I was like, holy cow, this is overpowering. What we like. I had a Dorito after not having any junk food for a long time. And I used to like Doritos. It's like it's too tart and salty and strong and and that does change. So I'm surprised when people who are used to eating that like my food, because I'm like, I think I have more subtle flavors in my food now than I used to.
I remember seeing a documentary one time, and they were in some tribe somewhere in South America or someplace, and these people had never ate any processed food or what, and they're trying to get the guy with the camera to eat some maggots off of a log because that's what they were
Right.
eating. Hey, take some. And he's like, and then the guy with the camera gives him a bite of a candy bar, and he's like, oh, how do you eat that? And he's just gagging on it, just couldn't even eat it.
Yeah.
Definite palate change there. But yeah, it was important. It was a big step for me. Now, I didn't stay on keto. I did it for 2 years aggressively.
Yeah.
Like I had zero sugar. It was
almost
no carb. The only carbs I might have was an occasional piece of fruit,
right.
or maybe a bean or something, a little bit of beans or something. I stayed in ketosis for a couple years. Now I kind of do it randomly. I might do it for 2 or 3 months, take a few months off, do it for a couple months. I mean, I kind of go back and forth now, but I'll tell you what you're talking about. That reminded me of that when I first came off of keto, of just strict keto, clean keto. Yeah, it was hard to eat a lot of things that I was eating before. It just didn't taste right. Like, I took a drink of a soda a few months after that, and I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe I drank that stuff. So sweet,
Yeah, it's crazy. But if you don't ever detox by going off junk food, you don't realize what junk food takes like. And what I mean by detox is like go 2 months without any refined sugars of any kind and very little fruit, and not even like tortillas. Like if you have a tortilla, make your tortilla with corn flour or flour, and then taste a commercial tortilla, and it has sugar in it.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to commit, I think, to go off refined food. But if you can do it, like the easiest way is the way I'm doing it right now. Like it's steak or meat only pretty much all month long. And I am occasionally having a little bit of broccoli or something.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I was always putting ketchup on everything because I liked ketchup back then. Well, ketchup got corn syrup in it. Can't have ketchup no more. So I'm putting mustard on stuff because it was like the only thing you could put on anything that didn't have anything, So just everything's got sugar in it. Everything. It's a corn syrup and everything, it seems like.
Yeah.
So you just gotta, that's why I say when you're cooking from scratch, what's in there.
Yeah.
You're in control of what you're eating. 100%. And you can make homemade ketchups without it, and things like that.
And that's another homestead concept that you can do in an apartment. If there is a way to cook food in your apartment and you have a refrigerator, then learning to do things from scratch is great. Even if it's, make your pasta noodles from scratch. Learn to bake the bread from scratch. Learn to saute a stir fry from scratch. And if you just one thing at a time, gives you a lower grocery bill because you're able to buy the core ingredients and not the package. So the package looks cheaper, but my experience in going to a from scratch lifestyle, even when I was grocery store dependent from a more prepackaged things, was my grocery bill got lower.
Yeah.
Because I was buying flour and yeast, not bread. And bread's cheap.
And you'll notice that by how much waste you're producing too. Like we used to take out like 2 bags of trash a day eating all this processed food. Then you start taking out like 1 bag of trash every 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Because you don't have all these packages and everything. Everything's coming in. It's amazing. You'll notice that big difference.
Yeah.
When I think about homesteading too, anywhere, it's so much bigger than just food too. I mean, it gets into, making your own cleaners, making your own medicines. I mean, you can just go as far as you want with that. And all those things you can do in an apartment. You can even make, you're making a lot of stuff out of vinegar. You can make your own vinegar to make your own cleaners there's just you can take it so far and it even beyond food and in the homesteading realm. And it's a good place to go if you really want to dive into it 100%. It doesn't all have to be garden and it doesn't all have to be animals. There's so many other places to go in the homesteading realm for sure.
Absolutely. There's a lot out there that you can do, and a lot of just doing it yourself, like learning how to assess something, use what you have to come up with a creative solution that you like. Like right now, I would like a way to store my logs next to my wood stove that's not just stacked on the ground, which is how they're stored. Now, I do have one log holder already that I found in the bushes on my property when I moved here. And it has all of my Osage orange logs, because every time I find an Osage orange log, I put it in there because they burn hotter and I heat with wood. But there's the everyday firewood stack, and it makes a big mess and it looks kind of cluttery and whatever. So I started saying, like, what if I had a second log holder and I could have like the warm logs and the normal logs? And I started pricing. I could buy one, but I'm like, what do I have here that I can make one that looks cute with? And
Yeah.
that's, to me, that's a homesteading mindset. Like, I'm going to get the value of what's here and produced on property or left behind by somebody else or left over from my bathroom remodel, right? And can I also make it look cute? Because for me, it's important visually to have things start looking cuter here than they do now. That's one of my long-term goals. And that's a homestead mindset that like, it makes sense for me to invest an afternoon on that, even though I could spend $300 on a log holder. I could spend less, but they'll be too cheaply made. So it's about $200 to $300 for one that looks cute, that's durable, or I can make one that looks cute and durable in an afternoon. And
Yeah.
I get the creative payoff, the mental health payoff, and I don't spend that $300.
Yeah. And reusing and repurposing are huge concepts in the whole homesteading movement, and recycling too, if you're into the environment and all those things. I am. I mean, I think it's important. I mean, the more I consider like the chemicals that are being sprayed on fields
Yeah.
and all the, it's part of what led to my poor health, because I'm eating this garbage that's been sprayed with everything, and it's got all these preservatives, and, I'll go down that path again. But, so it is an important aspect of me homesteading as well, that I want to do it in a pure way. I don't want to spray anything on my garden. I don't want to give my animals things that they don't have to have, and I want to reuse and repurpose. And as a last resort, recycle anything that I can, so I don't go all green freak, but it's important. I think if we want to have a planet in another 100 years, it's probably important.
Yeah. I think about reusable things that I hadn't I'm a woman, so a cycle happens every month, right? And disposable ways of managing that are what I've traditionally used. About a year ago, I was like, well, obviously I haven't gone through menopause yet, so I'm going to try the washable, reusable options that there are. And I didn't trust it to do what it needs to do when I'm out and about, but I'm mostly home anyway. So,
Yeah.
they work great. And I thought, what just happened is a volume of garbage that is partially plastic is no longer coming off my homestead.
Yeah.
I have something I can wash, and it's not an unpleasant situation, and it manages it better. Now, does it use more resource to produce that item, that reusable item, than the ones that you buy off the shelf? Yes. It uses more energy for the reusable. But for me, it's also about not putting plastic into the landfill, and then and having something that's not producing a bag of stuff that needs to leave my homestead, because that's effort. I have to drive that bag to a dumpster that then gets driven to a landfill that's then there for I don't know how many hundreds of years as the plastic breaks down.
Right.
So
yeah.
And you start seeing things that way. And I think that's why homesteaders end up, without realizing they're environmentalists, because that, like, the environmentalism hat has been vilified or taken over by people who are more worried about their issue than actually helping the environment.
Right.
But most homesteaders are environmentalists, and they're doing better care of the earth than the non-homestead approach. And then that you're able to do it in an urban environment means you can bring that same mentality to an urban environment, and you're not, as you said, using a trash bag a day. It might be 2 trash bags a week.
Right.
Instead.
And that's why I really am big on just trying to convince as many people as I can that live in those settings to do that. Because again, most people live in that situation. And if you could change the minds of, the majority of people that are living in those situations to live more like this, I mean, the impact on the planet is huge. It's just huge.
Yeah,
for sure.
Cool.
And we don't have to have a government force us to do things. We can just do it on our own.
Well, the thing is, if we had to take our own trash off and deal with it, a lot of us would be way better at producing less trash. It would become a pain in our neck. But because we either pay only $20 or $30 a month, or it's built here, it's built into the property taxes. There's no bill.
Yeah.
When you have, I mean, we don't have service where I live, but in the cities they have service. It's already paid for. Once you have that, it's like, why do I care? I get this whole bin every month, every week, and I can fill it up.
Yep.
So
yeah, you just tend to not think about it. Like I said, things that are out of sight are out of our mind, and we don't think a lot of thought until it comes back and bites us with a cancer or just an
mhm.
environmental impact that affects our water supply or something. Something comes back and it hits us more personally. Then we're like, oh wow, maybe this shouldn't have been going on. And it happens all the time. In places. It's part of the reality. It does come back and bite you sometimes, and
Yeah.
it's a shame it has to get to that point before people start thinking about it or taking it serious. I mean,
Well, it's not
I'm
unusual.
an
It's a lot
example.
harder to go to the gym or to work out every day. To make that right choice every day is what you need to learn to do to build fitness
Yeah.
into your lifestyle, right?
And
And it's
that's
a
a
lot
good
easier to wait till you're 400 pounds and be like, okay, I guess I better start going to the gym. And then that's a lot harder project than if you just would have
yeah.
gone on a stupid walk every day.
And that's a good comparison that you're making there, because we'll say this: homesteading isn't necessarily easy, especially when you
Mhm.
start.
Yeah.
There's some work involved, especially when it comes to having to build some things and get some gardens in, especially in the spring and in the fall. I mean, this
Mhm.
last year we were preserving and canning and doing so much stuff this fall. It was starting to wear on me. I mean, it was a long days, putting this food
Yeah.
up. But you
Yeah.
appreciate that in February,
Yeah.
when you're wanting stuff out of your cabinet.
Yeah.
And it's not, so I don't want to mislead anybody into thinking, well, this sounds really
Super easy.
easy.
No,
Yeah, just go out here and just pop a couple seeds in the ground and collect food. It's great. It's not always that easy. And there's failures and there's bugs and there's disease and there's,
yeah.
hot days and sweating your butt off. And if you do space things out, you get weeds taken over, and there's a lot to consider. But I would tell anybody that asked me, is it worth it? Yeah, absolutely. It's worth it for sure.
Yeah.
Good
Here's
trade off.
one. Philippine Nomad says on week 10 of carnivore and no more regular grocery trips, meat and egg vendors only. My wife and I are about 95% waste free, no veggie waste, processed foods, packaging waste. Yeah.
Yeah. It is an amazing thing. You'll notice that so fast. It
Yeah.
was the thing. You don't even realize that, you don't even think about it being something you're going to notice, but then you just, wow, generally this trash I'm taking it out every day, or whatever. And now it's,
Yeah.
there was, me and my wife and 3 daughters, we were generating a lot of trash, as you can imagine. And
Yeah.
then almost, like a third or a fifth of that, just all of a sudden, just immediately. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Just by going to Whole Foods.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
And like
mean
I
the
said,
grocery store,
you
guys. I
would,
mean actual Whole Foods.
you would notice that if you went to the farmer's market and brought the stuff home and made it from scratch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just not just growing it, just doing that, even you would notice that kind of difference. And you
Yeah.
know what? If you don't, if you're absolutely in a position where you just can't grow anything on your property, do that. Just go and
Yeah.
support people who are doing it in a way that you would do it if you were doing it. Clean, pure food. I hate to use the word organic, but
Yeah.
it's because it's a term that's been stolen. But those practices, better than organic, we'll say practices, and buy from them, cook it from scratch, learn some recipes, and you'll eat better, produce less scraps, and probably eat cheaper too, because when you buy stuff from a farmer's market, generally it's cheaper than buying it from the grocery store.
Not ours, but yeah.
Really, yeah, sometimes it is.
Yeah. So I'm not a proponent of farmed foods being cheaper than the grocery store, really, because I know
The
what goes
eggs
into
there are
it.
probably
Yeah.
cheaper right now.
But the thing is, so I find if I do from scratch living, I spend less in aggregate, even if the particular head of broccoli at the farmer's market was more.
Yeah.
And it's for 2 reasons. One, I'm not spending money on packaged stuff to help make whatever taste better. I'm
Right.
actually using the core ingredients, and that's cheaper. And the other thing is meat.
Mm-hmm.
If you buy whole animals, even if it seems expensive when you buy the whole cow at $1,600 to $2,500 processed, it's less than if you only buy ribeye steaks or whatever at the grocery store.
Right.
It's less when beef spikes in price. And you learn to cook a bunch of stuff you didn't even know how to cook.
Right.
So
A lot of times, yeah, even if it's maybe it's a good point. If you're buying stuff maybe on a small scale, it probably might be more expensive, but you might be able to go to like people with just farms and buy stuff
yeah,
in bulk and then learn how to preserve and process and preserve that yourself and save some
yeah.
money that way. Yeah. We've
Yeah,
bought a
you
lot of,
actually that's the other money savings thing.
yeah.
So this year So if you go to the farmer's market and you buy the things that may be more than a grocery store, but you get to know the farmers, then this year I love broccoli. As I've mentioned, I'm bad at growing broccoli. But my farmer buddy is not. So I'm buying broccoli every week. And he was like, Nicole, it got hot. I've got 50 plants that need to be like eaten right now. Do you want them? I'll give them to you for $1 each. So then it was cheaper than a head of broccoli usually was at the farmer's market. And I said, sure. Sent Tactical out with my car. And he came back with 20 heads of broccoli still attached to the roots of the plants. It was the dirtiest thing ever. So like the farmer just ripped them out and threw them in my car, right? So he did no work, no processing at all. So I had to, cut the heads off. I got like dirt all over the inside of my house because I should have done that outside, but I didn't know till hindsight happened. And then I blanched them all, which took me an afternoon on a Saturday, cut them up into smaller pieces, froze them in bags, and freeze dried them.
Yeah.
Over, just cycle them through the freeze dryer, put them in jars, and we're eating that now. And it's delicious.
Yeah.
And so that is another way you save money is if you know the farmers, they'll be like, well, I had an epic corn year and today it's all ripe on the same day. So it's on sale today.
Or you might even be able to barter some labor for free food. That way, just go in there and work half a day with them and let them hand you a couple bags of groceries or whatever. I mean, it's a thing, it's another way to get experience in it and get the food and learn some things while you're doing it. It's a good way to do it. Have you ever tried growing your broccoli in your hydroponics? You used to do aquaponics too. You still doing aquaponics?
I have aquaponics and hydroponics.
Have you tried growing the broccoli in those systems?
Yes.
Doesn't do well.
I have a pest problem. That was okay. So what happens is I get it out, it starts going, and then it bolts when it gets hot. And so there's like, I believe, and I'll get like this scrawny little head that then turns into flowers, right?
Yeah, right. That's the heat. Yeah.
Last year, because spring waited until the oven turned on, I got a couple of small cauliflower heads in the aquaponics system and in my potted plants outside. And this is like zone 1 right here. Up in the garden where I don't go enough, I just don't even bother with it because I'm not going to keep the pests off it right now. It's this year. I know I also won't spend enough time up there, so I'm planning to plant that garden as if I won't spend time up there. We are moving the aquaponics system, and I'll see if that helps. Matters, but
maybe you can get some shade cloth over it or something. Maybe that would.
I have shade cloth on it.
Oh, still.
I live on a south-facing slope that gets a lot of. So when you said at least 6 hours of sun, I'm like, man, I wish I only had 6 hours of sun on my garden.
And I'll tell you, and that again, planning out your property. On my south side of my house, I had this nice little area where I wanted to plant some stuff right on the south side of my house, but it's really hot. So you got that, you got the all day sun blaring on it. You got that heat sink of a house just collecting heat all day, blaring back out on the garden.
That's where you put your okra.
Well, my thought was, what could I do to kind of ease that up a little bit? So I came out, a few feet, and I planted 4 trees. But I planted them far enough apart where there'd be the sporadic sun, hitting them throughout the day. And now it's like a very productive area. Nothing gets overheated and works really good. But you can even use some trees and things like that to create these microclimates that will make it a usable space. Because sometimes you have a space that isn't usable. So, sometimes what looks like a curse of a shade of a tree could be a blessing for your garden.
No, I mean, we got tree. I just put in about 15 more trees on my property.
We've been working on that
forest install.
Garden,
and part of that is they will put shade on the hot spot of my
create those climates. And that's something you really
great for solar aspect, but hot in July.
It's something you gotta really think about. And planning is a huge part. It's more important even on an urban homestead, on a small homestead, than it is on a big homestead, because you got room to spread things out. You've really got to be intense in your planning. And that's why permaculture, getting into permaculture was such a blessing to me, because it really helps you think that out, you know, where you're going to put things, so, and how it works. And it really helped a lot. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're at about 1 hour and 20 minutes. So it's a good time for you to say, hey, Nicole, I want to be on your show again so we can continue this discussion. But hey, how can people follow you to like learn these things and see your journey?
Well, you can listen to the Modern Homesteading podcast if you like listening to podcasts. Doing that a couple episodes a week right now, and we actually do 3. Do one on a Patreon, and then do a couple public episodes. But yeah, and my co-host, I have a co-host on that show now, Rachel Jameson, and we've been putting out episodes at a pretty good pace for a while now, and having a lot of fun doing that. So we talk about everything homesteading. I mean, just whatever, not just gardening, but just whatever. We were talking a couple days ago about, like, our last episode, we was talking about raising bugs to feed our livestock. I mean, just
Yeah.
anything homestead related. So lots of good stuff there. I blog at redemptionpermaculture.com, and there's a lot of stuff to read there. I have a book out there. You can get it for free. Actually, if you sign up for my newsletter, you can get a PDF copy of it for free on my newsletter right now. So you can get that. And that book is all about what you have to consider for an urban homestead, for a small homestead. So you can check that out. But that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show today.
Well, I appreciate you having